back to another episode of Anderson Ad Break. I'm your host, Maddie.
And I'm Sam.
On today's episode, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. As you can see, it's just me and Sam today, and we're going to talk about all things starting a podcast, our learnings from 2024, and kind of like what we hope to do in the new year. So in this episode too, we want it to be a little bit more conversational. I know we've done a lot of interview style podcasts this year just to get like our, feet in the water and just kind of test everything out, get our internal process organized and, really figure out what it takes to run a podcast. So
we really had to just learn by doing and
Absolutely.
then try different things to see what worked, what didn't work. And then I think for us is just, this is going to be our first time just having a conversation without a script.
Hyping each other up. I think that's another important thing. Having a partner like host that you can trust with the podcast has been really helpful because it is like a team sport, especially then also having Carson, our videographer and editor, because it takes a whole team. I mean, we've said, we've interviewed all of our team members and it takes everyone, and it's been fun involving everyone in the process, and you kind of learn who's more into the podcast than others and who likes being on camera, who wants to come back and everything. But yeah, just learning how to keep everyone involved and keeping the internal process. So what's something for you that was a major takeaway?
My biggest takeaway was that no idea is too big if you have a supportive team.
Yeah.
But we had the support from leadership, we had support from the creative team, we had support of each other, and we had no idea how to start one or what to do. So we just did all the research and we support each other along the way. So I think that was the biggest takeaway, is that as long as you have the support, no idea is too big.
Absolutely. And I think our, agency owner, Ted, has been just incredible, especially, and especially Adrian, Sarah and everything, and helping us get this started because they trusted in us, right? I think what's interesting, this started out as an account service project for us because we're on the account services team in our agency, and they were let's do a professional development opportunity. And we're what is something that is authentic to us that we are really interested in the marketing, social media, advertising world? And I'm podcasts.
Sometimes when you do get too much into the planning phase, you overthink it.
Yeah.
And then that's when you can kind of, for me, start spiraling.
Yeah.
And then so it's nice to have the support of leadership to know that it's okay, even though we're going to fail at some points because we're all human, we have never done this before, and failing, I think, is important to do. Yeah. It's you learn by doing, you learn what not to do and what you should do and what you can get better at.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a huge professional development, is even just learning how to fail and be able to uplift each other.
But I think pushing ourselves to get to this point where we can have a conversational talk without, not sweat dripping is pretty awesome. I would say the big thing is just to getting started. I mean, obviously, podcast equipment, right? Having a microphone. It doesn't have to be the setup particularly. If you're a podcast listener or watcher, you can see people with all different types of setups, but obviously a great microphone. Obviously, we talked about financial investment, podcast equipment. And then the biggest thing with starting a podcast is you have to define your goals. You have to define your audience. You have to do some research behind it, right? Because if you don't, and you're a social media manager, I feel you would tell this to all your clients and stuff. If you don't have a why, if you don't have a reason behind why you're posting and what you're posting, then it can kind of just, people kind of connect with a certain theme or whatever. And I think that's how we've been successful just with helping create episode ideas, is we know our audience. We wanted to market to, younger professionals in the industry, but also we wanted it to be relatable to anyone in the industry who's interested in marketing, advertising, social media, but definitely hone in on that, younger audience. So I think that was kind of one of our main goals for sure.
Yeah, that was our goal, was to increase the 18 to 24 age range. And we ended up doing that, not just on YouTube, which was our original goal, but then we also did that across other channels like Instagram, LinkedIn's analytics are a little weird. They don't really say specific ages, but they do say titles.
Yeah.
So the coordinator position and the manager. So those age ranges did increase.
Yeah.
So we did hit our target goal, was increasing the 18 to 24 age range. So I'm really proud of us for doing that.
Same.
And even better, our goal was to, because in the beginning of the year, one of my social media goals, separate of the podcast, was to kind of revamp and reorganize and refresh our YouTube channel, which we completely did an overhaul, which was a major help, not just from the account side, but also with the creative side, creating amazing banners and logos and just helping with the copywriting of each YouTube video.
Right. I mean, honestly, I think a big part of it is just having content to make other content with, right? To put on the YouTube Shorts, on our Instagram Reels, on our newsletter, on our website, you know, like all of these things that we were able to now do because we had, you know, a kind of like a body of work. And I think just like we trusted our gut starting a podcast because we saw all the upcoming podcasts. I mean, now, even since like reflecting on like the past year, there's been an exponential amount of podcasts, you know, created by other agencies. You know, one of our goals for the new year is to, you know, produce even more content. You've been following us since the beginning. You know, we post maybe like once a month. I think that is due to, you know, what we learned along the way, you know, working on like the process. I mean, like we said, a big thing that we've learned and just like as listeners ourselves is we want to be able to talk more and have those more conversational and be more human and have, you know, you guys be more invested into Sam and I and, you know, learn more about us and our interests and everything like that. So I don't know, what would you say about like some reflection over the past year for that?
I would say definitely reflecting on the past year and looking at our goals for next year is just doing it. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to just go for it.
Yeah. If you're going to invest your time and your agency's time, your company's time, whatever, you know, you're doing, you know, you have to be all in. And I think that is something where we're all into this, but just like learning the tweaks and like how involved you really do have to be. I think it's about being strategic. We still put in a lot of time into this podcast, but being strategic where we put that time. And I'm just super excited for, you know, this next like generation of our podcast to like put more time into the actual, you know, like more creative side. You know, we want to like insert more graphics and we want to do like a little bit more trendy with like the captions with our Instagram Reels and stuff. So we're super excited for the future state and like what that will hold. And we just appreciate everyone kind of being on this journey with us. Again, like we weren't professionals like sitting in front of a camera. We weren't super comfortable sitting in front of the camera. So we would do a lot of retakes and he would spend so much time editing. So think about like, you know, how we used to be in front of the camera. I think we used to be very like stiff and like hi, welcome to our podcast.
Public speaking was a huge professional development opportunity that I needed to get better at. And I feel like I have gotten a lot more comfortable. Yeah. Obviously, I can still improve more. There's always room for improvement. But I feel like just by doing this podcast, I have really put myself out there. And I'm really proud of myself for that.
And that was a huge thing for me as well. I would say like outside these podcast walls or whatever, you know, I can public speak pretty well, but I think like even for me in front of the camera was super challenging, just to get like really comfortable. And it's just nice to like, also I think some advice is like create a great environment. Obviously we already said have a supportive team and everything like that, but just not only supportive in the sense of like they support your podcast, but like, you know, whoever is behind the camera, you know, obviously we talk about Carson, and he's just super supportive and you know, we respect each other and he gives us also real feedback, and you need that too. You don't want someone to just be like, yeah, this is great. You know, you need someone actively listening and paying attention. Active listening is also a huge thing that we had to learn as well, because I think at the beginning we were super concentrated on what we had to say and our points that we had to make. That I think some great feedback even from Adria was like, make sure you're listening to each other. You know, it's okay to adapt, you know, your answers or, you know, talk about something different, right? And I think a big thing for me as well, I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, the camera training, as you mentioned. Oh my gosh, that was so helpful. I think we like blocked off an hour with Carson and he just kind of like taught us how to set the lights up, taught us how to set the mics up, taught us what, you know, everything means, taught us about the two cameras, when to look. He taught us about like, you know, the framing. It doesn't matter like what your technical role is, right? When we're doing this project together, it's like, it's all hands on deck. At the end of the day, if we're trying to accomplish like a communal goal, we're going to all like actively participate and dedicate the same amount of time. And so I think that's just kind of like goes into show, like when we come in and set up the podcast, we do it together. We talk, we learn as we're going. Obviously, Carson is more the expert, but I think we've gotten pretty good at, like, if we needed to set up this podcast room by ourselves, like we could, after that training. So I think that is really important if you are setting up a podcast, not just like yourself, obviously, if it's like for an agency or a business or you're just involving a bit more people. Like, I think setting that expectation with your team is like really important. And I think it creates a good community.
Definitely.
All right. I want to know, Sam, what is one of your, or multiple, like favorite episodes from this year, like some highlights from the episodes?
I think first off was the second episode where we sat down with Ted and kind of learned more about Anderson, how we started Anderson Advertising, why he started it. And I learned so much about him. Like, I already thought like I knew him, but like I feel like whenever we sit him down and we talk to him on the podcast, I always learn something new. I'm like, wow, I did not know that about you. So I thought that was really interesting. And secondly, I would say the Women in Leadership series. I loved learning from Sarah and Adri because I do look up to them, and I would love to just take some of their leadership styles and their skills and learn how to be a better leader myself. So that was amazing that we got to learn from them and like kind of just dig into what made them a great leader.
Yeah. No, I think we got like exclusive access. You know, I think that was like something that was amazing is like, I remember being really nervous for TEDS, especially because that was only like our second one. Obviously TED's wonderful and but still it's just, you want to impress, right? Exactly. It's like, he's given us this opportunity. So we were just like, gosh, we hope that, you know, he loves it. And he did. And I think, you know, his feedback and everything was so instrumental in like motivating us to keep going, because we were like, okay, Ted likes it. You know, obviously we have things to work on, but you know, we have that support. Super, super important. Okay. My favorite episodes, I was really proud of the Pride episode we did for June when I interviewed Austin, our digital media manager, and then Jenny, our copywriter. You know, they're, you know, my fellow queer team members, and they've been instrumental in my life, personal life, and working life. But I'm just super proud of that episode. You know, we put a lot of work into it. We you know, had a lot of talks with the team. You know, wanted to make sure everyone was comfortable, and I think we had a nail, and it was one of the most successful, you know, podcasts we did, and it was just super fun to film.
Okay, so speaking of guests, besides the Pride episode, were there any other notable episodes that we did that come to mind?
Yes, we had our first guest, Steve Slogocki, for the Matters of State Strategies episode I did with Steve, Matt Grodsky, and Ted Anderson. That was a super, super fun filming day. I, you know, used to work for Matters of State Strategies, and so it was really fun interviewing Matt and, you know, Ted together. And then I used to also work with Steve, so having him on was just super amazing. And so that was like a really big also professional development thing, because that was our first guest, and like having you there to like help facilitate it, and then also just like, you know, filming with the guest and us all watching, you know, from behind the scenes, because they were on the couch, we were all behind the scenes, behind the camera, and that was a super successful episode. So I'm really proud of us. We put that together. You know, it was kind of like guest coordination. You know, that was our first time, so we were obviously since Steve is, you know, a friend, you know, someone we knew, we were a little bit more at ease, but still we wanted to, you know, impress them. We wanted to show that like we have, you know, a whole setup and a whole thing. And yeah, I thought the Matters of State episode went really well, and I was really proud of that one. And I thought, and I just love politics in general. I do think it's very fascinating. That was like my initial background when starting out. So yeah, it was kind of like a full circle moment. So let's talk about some of our goals for the new year. But what's something else that we're kind of looking forward to in the new year?
I would say learning how to do exactly what we're doing right now is a huge goal. I think between you and I, we like to overthink and we like to kind of overcomplicate.
Absolutely.
So I think for us, we've learned that we just have to go for it. Yeah. And I think that will help streamline the beginning, the setup of the podcast, streamline like the outline, and even just spending less hours on that, and then like still being prepared and still researching, but just seeing how we're doing this episode right now, and that we feel very comfortable to just talk without having to hit like every single bullet point and saying like every single word that we need to say. And
I always admire people who can just on the spot kind of pivot and think of new things. So I think the way that this format is now is going to push us to get there, because obviously we want to give, you know, we want to give advice. We want to give information. We want to be thought leaders. We want, you know, you guys to take away something like really impactful from this podcast, not just, you know, learning about me and Sam, but learning about, you know, what's happening in the industry, you know, learning our perspectives on what's going on. But I want to be able to do that in a way where it can just be the conversational and not thinking like, oh, I have to hit every single point, but more so it flowing naturally. I think that's a big professional development thing for the both of us. And I'm really excited to, you know, work on it. You know, I think honestly, muscle memory at this point, it's like training your brain to do that. And that's always been one of my big goals, because I want to be able to be a great speaker one day, if like, elevate my career and, be a manager, be someone, you kind of have to have that like working skill.
It has been a year, but we've made it.
We've made it.
And there are amazing things to come in 2025.
Yes. Have we mentioned yet that we are on a new podcast platform? I think we have. Yes. Okay. But just to reiterate, everyone, it was a whole thing. We did so much research. We're finally on a platform called Blueberry. And so far it's been great. It's been easy uploading. I think that's a whole other thing about launching a podcast that we probably didn't discuss was getting on a podcast platform like Blueberry. Once you post, it goes out on all the channels.
And I think that was a huge part in the research that I was really picky about, because there are so many different kinds of podcast platforms that you can host your show on. And I think I wanted something that would integrate with YouTube, because it's like most podcasts that I know don't have the video version, but we do. Like, we started off very strong with the video, because I know a lot of people that I met at Social Media Marketing World who had podcasts, they said eventually their goal is that they wanted to do a video format, but they weren't there yet. So we kind of were reversed and did video first. So now with Blueberry, which was a very unique platform, was that every time we post our podcast on YouTube, it will just pull to an RSS feed, and the RSS feed will just put it onto Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Pandora. And it's been really fun to look at the analytics so far with Blueberry, is like seeing like what show is performing the best and where people are listening to us. I was shocked that people are asking their Alexa.
I know. Who's listening to us on their Alexa? I love it.
I know, which is kind of fun. So I'm a nerd when it comes to the analytics. So I've been loving that. But I was just like shocked that I'm like, oh, people listen to us on Pandora and Spotify.
I know. It's really cool, because I think and I think what makes this so fun for us is we're such avid podcast listeners. So then to see kind of like behind the scenes, like the research, like you said, like when we've been diving into that, it's just been so cool to see like, where we are, like how long people are listening, the retention rates, apps and devices, like all of those cool things. We're excited to dig in even deeper. Obviously, we didn't get on the platform until like later in the year, so we only have a couple episodes for them to like report on, but that's another thing for the next year and I think is super important for anyone wanting to start a podcast, is to have some sort of platform that can do your analytics, or at least yourself if you're posting and you're doing it solo, like to check, meta and all of those fun things, because it's going to be super helpful, because we're going to take that data to help inform, podcast length, audio quality, like we have a survey that will go out in our newsletter that we're going to ask people, like an array of questions that will help us inform like things that we can do better for the podcast. And I think we're all about evolving and learning and optimizing, honestly. And I think that's also a big thing that'll go into next year. But yeah, having a podcast platform and just doing your own research. I mean, like, I think if there's anything to like wrap this up and like take away from us is like, you have to do what fits you the best, like your agency, like when you're doing research, like there's no one size fits all. And when we were starting the podcast, we literally like Googled like how to start a podcast. I mean, that's how, that's kind of how it goes. I mean, we found some great resources. HubSpot has some great stuff. I mean, and just like any podcast platform, like hosting, they always have great resources, like Spotify and Apple. They had some great resources as well.
Buzzsprout had some great resources too.
Buzzsprout,
And they had like not just like articles, but even like courses where you can kind of learn and go and see everything that goes into even starting a podcast. So I'm so proud of us, and I'm so proud of our whole team for putting in all of the hard work, because we are here with our amazing neon sign. So thank you to everyone, leadership, the creative team, account services team, everyone, for all of your help and support for helping us start the podcast. And now this is episode 13.
Oh my goodness.
So,
and thank you to our new audience. I really, really, really appreciate you. And please, please, please make sure to check us out on all platforms where you listen to your podcast or watch your podcast, because we are on there. So again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in 2025.
Anderson Ad Break is on all major platforms, so tune in wherever you get your podcasts or check out the video version of each episode on YouTube.
Like and subscribe to stay in the loop. You won't want to miss what's next.